Hello students, I am Dr. Saleha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography from Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. So today the topic of discussion is mechanism behind global warming. You may be thinking today's topic regarding the global warming, why so it is. In previous lecture we have discussed about the different perspectives of climate change. The two perspectives we have discussed very much in detail, that climate change is real. That is the one perspective, and another perspective is climate change is overstated, it is exaggerated, it is just the natural variability of Earth's climatic system. So, now we are going to discuss in our lecture series the different evidences which supports the first perspective, that is the climate change. And the first major evidence is the global warming. So here we are going to discuss the mechanism of global warming. So let us start today's class, student. Welcome to today's class. What is global warming? Actually, here the word signifies global and we can say warming. So warming that is related to the rise in temperature, we can say a somewhat heat. So warming, and global, that we are talking about our Earth. So global warming can be simply defined as gradual rise in temperature, particularly near the Earth's surface, which is a phenomenon that has been observed over past 1 or 2 centuries. When we analyze data decades and decades before, even we talk about the centuries, global warming is such a phenomena which have been observed over the past centuries. And this change in the global temperature that disrupts overall Earth's climatic pattern, and it has direct impact on the, we can say, pattern of precipitation, we can say temperature changes or wind changes, overall elements of the climate change. It has direct impact on the human being, ecosystem, habitat, etc. Even the concept of global warming is quite controversial, as we have seen in previous lecture through the perspective on climate change, but the scientists have provided pertinent data in order to support the notion that the Earth's temperature is continuously increasing. That's why here we are discussing about the global warming. There are various causes of global warming, natural as well as anthropogenic driven, means human caused. These causes may be the result of various activities that is conducted by the human beings, like industrialization, urbanization, emissions through the transportation sector, agriculture sector, etc. That's why it becomes very much important to know the negative impacts of global warming. When we will know the negative impacts of global warming, then only we can address the issues. So this here lies the significance why to know the global warming, its causes and its impact. So let us start discussing with the mechanism behind the global warming. We know that Earth is generally illuminated by the sun rays, means sun energy is received particularly in the form of short waves, or we can call it visible light frequencies, mainly emitted by the sun radiation. Means Earth is receiving radiation, particularly the ultraviolet and visible light radiation, that is the short wave. Means Earth is mainly illuminated by the solar radiation. Now, the Earth has the ability to absorb these frequencies, that is the short wave. After absorbing, subsequently, it emits this and converts and emits it in terms of infrared radiation, means having frequencies of infrared radiation. Now, whatever the different type of gases like carbon dioxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen, cloud covers, and we can say atmospheric particles, particularly the solid particles which are present in the atmosphere, troposphere and lower atmosphere, they absorb this radiated infrared radiation and they again re-radiate it. Means when Earth is almost, when we see the atmosphere, it is almost transparent for the incoming solar radiation, which is in short wavelength, some of which is even scattered and reflected and lost, but major portion is received by the Earth's surface. But when it is radiated after reflected back by the Earth's surface into infrared radiation spectrum, most of it is also observed by the gaseous molecules, the particulate matter, the clouds which are present in the atmosphere, particularly troposphere and the stratosphere. Now, the energy is particularly which is absorbed by the gases, that results in the vibrational energy changes in the molecules. Means the energy, the radiated infrared radiation which are absorbed by the molecules that is present in the atmosphere in terms of the particulate molecules, gaseous molecules, so that result in the vibrational energy changes in the molecules. Now, the energy is transformed into kinetic energy by the vibrational change of the carbon dioxide molecules. When it is absorbed, it causes vibrational energy changes, and through this mechanism, it converts into kinetic energy by the carbon dioxide molecules. Now, this conversion into kinetic energy that elevates the temperature of the atmosphere. Subsequently, the surplus energy is re-emitted as infrared radiation. So, two things you have to remember, student. First thing, the Earth receives energy, or we can say it gets heated up by solar radiation, and when it is reflected back, the most of the energy is also absorbed by the gaseous molecules and the particulate matter which is present in the atmosphere. When it is absorbed, it causes certain changes, vibrational energy in the carbon dioxide molecules, and due to this vibrational energy changes, it is transformed into kinetic energy, and this kinetic energy is the reason behind raising the temperature of the atmosphere. So, overall we can say, if there is increase in the volume of this greenhouse gases, particularly the carbon dioxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen, then there will be more absorption, more transformation of this vibrational energy into kinetic energy, and the temperature elevation will continue. So, the effect is exacerbated particularly due to the increased absorption of the infrared by carbon dioxide. Just see here in this diagram, it depicts the mechanism of global warming. You can see here that the Earth is receiving the sunlight energies. Just see, the thickness denotes the amount and it releases heat. This is what somewhat we can say a balanced condition, ideal condition, means it receives heat. Some of the energy is lost on the atmosphere by different processes, maybe through the scattering and all, and then it releases heat. It absorbs heat in form of the short waves and releases heat in form of long waves, infrared radiation frequencies. Now, another condition, when the greenhouse gases increases, this is not the ideal condition, not the balanced condition. You just see the energy is received by the sun, but the release of the energy into the space is not as much as you can see the thickness here in terms of the ideal condition. Means most of the energy have been absorbed by the atmosphere. So, thus their elevation in the temperature of the atmosphere can be observed. So, this is all we can say a bit about we will discuss more about the mechanism further in our slides. So, this is a mechanism of global warming and climate change. So, large volumes of greenhouse gas emission, particularly we are talking about carbon dioxide concentration in the air, to rise and increase the heat absorption, resulting into temperature rise, thus global warming occurs. Means larger amount of greenhouse gases, and we know the greenhouse gases are mostly the carbon dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, we can say, methane and water vapor. So, these are the few important gases, greenhouse gases. There are separate lecture on the greenhouse gases. There we will discuss each of these gases in detail. Actually, when the amount of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere increases, it absorbs the heat, means heat absorption increases, which results into temperature rise, and thus global warming occurs. Due to this global warming, the glaciers melt, ice cap melt because of temperature is rising. So, this diagram particularly shows what happens and what are its impacts. Means you can say this is this glacier melt, ice cap melt, you can observe sea level rise. On the other hand, thermal expansion takes place. Thermal expansion means when the temperature rises, heating of water takes place, the water molecules expands. When the water molecules expands, it leads to the thermal expansion of seawater, and this thermal expansion will impact more intense typhoon, increased in precipitation, and more frequency of the rains and droughts at different places, which is also related with the this thermal expansion leads to sea level rise because the water molecules is expanding. Second thing, we are here change in evapotranspiration, means temperature is rising, there will be more transpiration. Here we are talking about evapotranspiration, means evaporation and transpiration. Evaporation, that is from the land surface overall we are talking about, and transpiration we are talking about evaporation from the plants. The combined term is known as evapotranspiration. So, evapotranspiration exceeds when it exceeds, it leads to more intense typhoons, increased in precipitation, and more frequent heavy rainfall. And overall, these things impact the increase in the river flow. Then we can say change in snow accumulation condition, that is also the result of global warming, and that leads to the earlier snow melt, particularly reduction of discharge, which changes the water use pattern. So, these are the few we can say impacts of the global warming. Now, we were talking about the mechanism, still we were discussing. We know the major cause of global warming, that is the increase in the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and these greenhouse gases significantly influences our atmosphere by absorbing more heat. We know that the Earth's temperature would be so low, life even would not exist if there were no greenhouse gases. Means the ideal balance is to be maintained. The greenhouse play a very important role in the Earth's in the regulation of Earth's temperature, but when it exceeds the limit, then that can be seen in terms of the ill impacts. Various repercussions will be seen. So, if there were no greenhouse gases, even the life would not exist. The temperature would have been so low. So, gases like carbon dioxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen, these are the major greenhouse gases. Even water vapor, ozone are also other significant greenhouse gas. Let us discuss the same mechanism which we have talked now in detail, point by point. First thing, that under the process of global warming, you should understand, students, the earth is illuminated by the sunlight. Means the primary form of solar radiation that reaches the earth's atmosphere is particularly the visible light emitted by the sun. We are talking about this because the form of solar radiation received by the earth's surface is the short wave radiation, having the short wavelength. So clouds, atmospheric particles and Earth's surface, they reflect approximately 30% of the incoming radiation back into the space. Means if we assume that Earth receive the amount of heat as 100%, out of which 30% is mainly lost by the we can say due to the scattering from the clouds, absorption by the clouds, atmospheric particles overall, and even reflection from the surface. 30% that is mainly radiated back into the space, but the Earth's surface absorbs the remaining portion, contributing to planet's warming. Approximately the remaining portion is 70%. Now, second point, the Earth emits infrared radiation, means it receives visible radiation that is in short wavelength. It emits infrared radiation that is in long wavelength. Earth's surface absorbs solar energy which is converted into infrared radiation and radiated back into the space. Now, the main thing comes here, the infrared radiation which is radiated outwards by the Earth's surface, it is not all of it is directly emitted into the space. I'm saying here, whatever the energy that is radiated by the Earth's surface outward, not all of it is radiated back into the space, because the absorption and re-radiation through the greenhouse gases takes place. Some of this outgoing infrared radiation is absorbed by the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, like by the carbon dioxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen, and we can say water vapor. Now, after absorbing this energy which was radiated by the Earth's surface, I have said some of the energy is absorbed by these greenhouse gases. Now, these greenhouse gases will re-radiate the energy in all the direction. Means after absorption, suppose this is a CO2 molecule, it absorbs some amount of energy. After absorbing, it will re-radiate the energy in several directions, in different direction. Then a portion of this re-radiated heat is again reflected back to the Earth's surface, contributing further warming. Means instead of going outside, we can say instead of going to the space, this re-radiated energy is reflected again in the lower atmosphere in the Earth, on the Earth's surface, which is the major cause of further warming. That's why it is said that any increase in the greenhouse concentration, that will result in increase in the absorption of the re-radiation of the infrared radiation, and increasing the global temperature. Means increase in the greenhouse gases means that will increase the absorption of the infrared radiation from the Earth's surface, and that will lead to the rise in the global temperature. There are various mechanisms also which are known as positive feedback loops, which increases the global temperature in a loop. Means cause also, impacts also. For example, here we will take the warming process can be further exacerbated by positive feedback mechanism as global temperature rises. Just see here, if you are talking about ice albedo feedback, we know the Earth's reflective surface is diminishing day by day by the rise in temperature, and that leads to the melting of ice, either in terms of we can say Arctic region, Antarctic region, or high altitude regions. Means the Earth's reflective surface, which maintains the Earth's albedo, is diminishing day by day by the melting of ice, which results in the increased solar absorption. If ice will melt, the surfaces will be exposed, and that will absorb more solar radiation, and thus warming process will increase. So, once it absorbs and again it will release that heat again it will absorb, means it will create a positive feedback loop. Many times the thawing of permafrost, that also is given as example of positive feedback, because thawing of permafrost, that releases huge amount of methane which is trapped in a permafrost. It releases methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas. Again, it will increase the absorption of radiated energy from the earth's surface, thus increasing the temperature. Increase of temperature again lead to the permafrost thawing, and this process continues, which is known as positive feedback loop. Suddenly, if we talk about water vapor feedback, the addition of more water vapor uh, to the atmosphere, because rise in global temperature, that will increase evaporation, or we can say evapotranspiration, due to which more water will be added into the atmosphere. And we know that this water vapor is one of the greenhouse gas that will again lead to the absorption of heat, and thus temperature rising will continue, thus creating a positive feedback loop. What are the different causes of global warming? When we have started this lecture, we have discussed the global warming have two major causes. One is anthropogenic driven and another is naturally driven. If we talk about the man-made causes of global warming, first one here I have taken deforestation. Deforestation, we know forests are regarded as the primary carbon sink. They sequester, they take out carbon from the atmosphere. So, if their cover is decreased, this carbon sink, the area of carbon sink will decrease, and there will be increase in the content, in the volume of carbon dioxide. Particularly this green cover forests, they sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in the presence of sunlight to create their own food. The phenomenon is known as photosynthesis. Thus, these forests maintain the environmental equilibrium by absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. And we know through the analysis, through the various data, the forests are being depleted for variety of domestic and commercial purposes, which leads to the increase in the volume of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The second most important cause of global warming is utilization of vehicles. Mainly we know increase in the greenhouse gases that leads to the global warming, and the major contributor of greenhouse gases is particularly the fossil fuels, whether it may be used through the industries, whether it may be used through the transportation sector, thermal power plants, etc. So here I have taken an example of utilization of vehicles. We know various greenhouse emissions are produced by the use of vehicles even for a smaller distance. Another important gas is chlorofluorocarbons. We are now introducing chlorofluorocarbons known as CFCs into the atmosphere by use of the excessive air conditions, refrigerators, and these CFCs impacts the atmospheric ozone layer. There is depletion and thinning of the ozone layer, which protect us from the ultraviolet rays. So, because this ozone layer absorbs ultraviolet rays, once it is depleted, or if the thinning of the ozone layer takes place, then even there will be the increase in the receipt of the ultraviolet rays by the Earth's surface, thus rise of temperature can be observed. CFCs have resulted in the depletion of the ozone layer and thus paving the way for ultraviolet radiation and elevating the Earth's temperature. Talking about the industrial development. We know that the Earth's temperature has been rising at a very high rate since the onset of the industrialization. If we compare the data of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere pre-industrialization and industrialization, then we can see there is an accelerated pace of increase in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Between 1880 and 2012, the global temperature increased by 0.9, and if we now talk about the present, it is around about 1.1 degrees centigrade according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Another important human-driven cause is agriculture. Carbon dioxide and methane gas are generated by a variety of agricultural practices, mainly from the paddy, we can say paddy fields, or we can even see animal agriculture, because there during the digestion process, particularly among the animals, enteric fermentation takes place, due to which huge amount of methane is emitted to the atmosphere. So, the carbon dioxide and methane, particularly from the paddy fields, or we can say animal agriculture, that is released in the atmosphere. These substances contribute to the greenhouse gas that are present in the atmosphere, thereby elevating the Earth's temperature. Here, different causes of global warming have been depicted through the pictures you can see here: deforestation, burning of fossil fuels, thermal power plant, industrialization, pollution of automobile, cultivation of land, eruption of volcanoes, breathing of living organism, decay of dead organism, domestic cooking, mainly through the solid fuels, etc. So, till now we have talked about the anthropogenic causes. Let us talk about some of the natural causes of global warming. The most prominent cause is here volcano and water vapor. We know that volcanoes are among the most significant natural contributors of global warming. The climate is influenced by the debris and smoke that is particularly relieved by the volcanic eruptions, which are carried into the atmosphere. This smoke, this particle are responsible for absorbing more heat in the atmosphere. When we talk about water vapor, we know Earth temperature is rising, which is resulting in a greater amount of evaporation. Means a sort of positive feedback loop is created here. Earth's temperature is rising, creating or we may say elevating the evapotranspiration, even evaporation from the water bodies, and this water vapor remains in the atmosphere, which contributes to the further global warming. Another major cause, natural cause of global warming is the process of melting of long-term freezing. Although I have already talked that the permafrost, we know it is a frozen soil which traps the methane and even the environmental vapors for several years and located beneath the Earth's surface. But when this permafrost thaws, dissolves, it releases the gases into the atmosphere, which are capable of absorbing heat, thus raising the Earth's temperature. Even the forest, when it is at ablaze, when forest fire, bushfire occurs, this forest blazes release substantial amount of carbon containing smoke into the atmosphere. Through this, the Earth temperature is elevated. These are few of the, although there are lots of we can say consequences of global warming. Here I have mentioned few major ones, like global warming directly leads to the increase in the temperature, and we know that the temperature here has increased by almost 1.1 degrees centigrade if we compare it from 1880s. This has led to the increase in the erosion of glaciers, melting of ice, we can say permafrost, which has resulted in the increase of the sea level. Several ecological hazards have been observed due to the global warming. For example, if we talk about the coral reefs, they are greatly impacted by the global warming. As we know, these coral reefs are mainly built through the coral polyps, and coral polyps, they live in symbiotic association with the algae. Algae provides food to the coral polyp, and these algae are known as zooxanthellae. So actually these zooxanthellae, they live in symbiotic relation with the coral polyps. As these zooxanthellae, they provide food to the coral polyps, and coral polyps, uh, they provide the grooves, or we can say the living space for this zooxanthellae. When the temperature rises, or we can say acidification of seawater takes place, these coral polyps, they expel out these algae known as zooxanthellae, and they become white, which is known as coral bleaching. And through this coral bleaching, they become more susceptible and vulnerable to the climatic changes. And as we know, these coral reefs are the pasture ground for various organisms, aquatic organisms. If they are disturbed, means that may result to the extinction of various flora and fauna. Overall, it will disturb whole of the aquatic system. So the fragility of this coral reef has been exacerbated by the rise of the global temperature. Global warming directly leads to the changes in the climate. Mainly the climatic conditions get altered due to the global warming. There may be the temperature rise, there may be drought in some regions, there may be flood may be experienced in some regions. Overall climatic element pattern gets changed. There may be change in the precipitation pattern, temperature regime, etc. Even the disease transmission, increase in the disease transmission have been observed, because we know the pattern of heat and humidity patterns are being altered by the global warming. Mainly the vector-borne diseases, vectors survive in hot and humid climatic condition, and these, when heat and humidity patterns are changing, it leads to the increase or the expansion of this vector-borne area, and many times it has resulted in the migration of mosquitoes to the newer area, and thus transmission of diseases takes place. There are, here in this diagram, there are some causes and effects of global warming and climate change are given. Even when I talked about the feedback loops, some of the feedback loops are given here. Already I have discussed, means we are talking about as the snow cover is decreasing, reflection is increasing and absorption is increasing. Another, I have discussed about the water vapor. When the temperature is rising, evaporation increases. This increase in the evaporation leads to more water vapor in the atmosphere. More water vapor atmosphere, more absorption of heat, that will lead to the global warming. So overall, these I have been discussed. Now effect you have seen on the environment. There is direct effect in terms of the ecosystem, biodiversity loss, even the extreme weather events we are going to discuss further in our lecture. These are a few of the effects we are going to discuss further in our lecture. So I talked about disease transmission. Even there is high mortality rate have been observed due to the global warming, which leads to the climate change. The average mortality toll typically rises as a result of an increase in the natural disaster like floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, etc. Additionally, we can say such incidents may release in the transmission of diseases that can have a detrimental impact on the human health. So these are the few of the impacts of global warming. There are more major impacts, but we are going to discuss it further in our different upcoming lectures. So that's all for today's student. Have a nice day. Thank you.